All right. Well, as we continue to get people in, I'm just going to kind of give everyone the guidelines for how things will work today. Just as a reminder, this is a webinar, so all participants will remain on mute throughout the presentation. That means that in order to ask questions, we would ask that you please use the Q&A dialog box. There's a button on your Zoom dashboard control that says Q&A. You can open that. You can type a question in that you would like to have answered by the panel. Other participants that see those questions can upvote them or downvote them, so we can prioritize which ones are most important to the group, and we will feed those in at various breakpoints to make sure that the panel gets the chance to answer your questions. As is normal on a Unique Venues webinar, we will run some polls today. We have a demographics and a session evaluation like also. We'll also do a specific poll for venues, one specifically for planners, and then one industry-wide that anyone can answer. And then finally, if you've got other comments or other questions outside of what's going on in the Q of A, feel free to use the chat box, open that up. Just make sure that you hit that little drop down next to where it says to, and you send it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone gets the benefit of your comments and your questions for today. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chuck Salem.
Hi, Joel. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Chuck Salem. I have the privilege of being the CEO and president of Unique Venues. And many of you don't know, but I also come from a background of actually conference, venue management, marketing, sales. I used to work for the University of Pittsburgh's Conference Center in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, on their Johnstown campus. And so I come from a point of both direct experience and then my opportunity to work every day with our network of, we're now well over 80,000 planners and 1,100 venues that we serve. Today, one of we were talking, one of the silver linings of this whole COVID-19 experience pandemic that we're going through right now is that we were talking about how the communities have come together that we get to work with and serve each and every day. And today, I am joined by a panel of experts in the industry that I also consider my colleagues and friends in the industry. Each and every one of the people on here are very special to me. And so you get to really realize in times like this how fortunate we are to have the connections that we have. First, and I'll ask you just, you can see their names. First is Sean Anderson. He's the Vice President of Sodexo Conferencing and also the Global President for IAC, which is the International Association of Conference Centers. Susan Labentsoff is the Canadian Sales Manager for Association and Medical Business at Tourisum Vancouver, which is the official CVB for Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. Leora Halpern Lanz is the Program Chair at Boston University School of Hospitality Administration's Masters of Management and Hospitality program. That's a lot there. And then James Spellos, I call him Jim, is that okay, is the owner of Meeting You, where he dedicates his energy to technology training, speaking engagements, and education. Many of you who have attended some of our Unique Venues annual conferences may have seen Jim. I know he spoke a couple times for us. So we're glad to have all four of you here today in our expert panel. So just to kind of lay the groundwork, this is our second expert panel. The first one was held right after the whole COVID-19 pandemic experience hit. We all kicked into action and said, let's get an industry panel together. That was about 6 weeks ago. And at that time, we were all really, it was pitch black out there. None of us really had any sense, any idea of where this was going to go, where we were being led to, what was going to happen to our industry. We did a lot of polling, which I'll refer to and compare, previous polls to current data that we're gathering. And since that time, and now with this second expert panel, we have a little bit more of an idea, and I say a little bit more of an idea of when certain states and provinces may be opening, what that means for meetings and events, what the landscape might look like for both venues, planners, and their associations, organizations, and businesses, or special events. we're still in the dark, but the skies are more gray now than that pitch black. And today we're hoping to throw some stars in there and shed a little bit of light on the future of meetings and events with the help of our expert panel members. So I'm going to start first with kind of a general question, and this is always the one where I ask our panel members to pretend like they've got a crystal ball, and I want you to, we have a recent poll by Unique Venues, planners, and venues show that the majority believe that they will not resume hosting actual events until the fall of 2020, the vast majority, which is a big difference from when we did our first poll. When we did our poll 6 weeks ago, late June, July, those were the magic months. The new poll data that we're getting from hundreds of planners and venues are suggesting that they are looking at the fall of 2020, and the majority are looking at September and October as their start windows. Taking into all the considerations that we'll discuss later, like social distancing and policies and whatnot and how-tos, what does your crystal ball tell us about the data that I just shared, that people are looking at the September and October opening? Do you agree? Do you feel that's a little too soon? Do you feel it could be later than that? Is it too late? Let's get some expert, and to make it easy, I'll just call out. I'm going to go around the horn starting with Sean.
Well, thanks for letting me go first, Chuck.
Well, your last name begins with A. I'm doing
yes.
that.
In high school, that was a burden, but today that works out well. So, I think that lines up with what we're seeing. I can tell you from on the operational side and the booking patterns that we're seeing, it lines up with what we're seeing with an asterisk, though. Will the majority of business start to pick up at that point in time? It seems like yes. However, there's still a lot of contracted business on the books, June, July, August. And what planners seem to want is to just continue to hold those dates in that space for now with, there's a little bit of unknown what those meetings might look like, what kind of changes we might have to make. But instead of giving them up entirely, they want to hang on to see if there's a way to still do the event, if it would be smaller, more regional, et cetera, et cetera. But they haven't necessarily taken all that off the books. It's been kind of a rolling process. And people that had that business as we got into March, maybe they were pushing it to that point in time. And they're not all, I would say 20 to 30% probably of the business is still looking to stay before September.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Leora?
Hi, Chuck. Interestingly, I was supposed to run a conference in Boston March 20th. So as someone who also sort of watches the industry, I was deeply involved because we needed to make a cancellation last minute. And I opted to cancel as opposed to postpone, because we were thinking, should we postpone to the fall? And truth be told is I was concerned so many others were going to postpone to the fall that there were going to be such a backlog of conflict that we just held off on ours. So sure enough, in watching the hospitality space right now, the hotel investment conferences, the lodging conferences that typically happen, they have been pushed to the fall. So we're seeing things coming up I'm hearing November a lot. I'm seeing things happening for November. What I'm hoping, and I was trying to reach out to some of those meeting planners over the last couple of days, and one of which I'm involved with, is that they become more of a mix, a blend of part in person and part virtual, because I'm not convinced that we can be completely together in a way that we knew in the fall.
And you wrote a great paper that I read about the future of meetings, and you talk about hybrid meetings. And just so everyone knows, it's going to definitely be a topic that we speak about today. I'm going to go next to James.
Let me unmute myself first. Thanks, Chuck. I'm going to agree with Leora that the hybrid approach is going to be what's happening. And I know we're speaking about it later. My crystal ball isn't as optimistic right now. I don't think, I'm from my perspective as a speaker at events, that do I really want to get on a plane before a lot of stuff have been tested out? I think any conference that's set for the summer, I'm finding is either being postponed or they're going to postpone it. No matter what they say officially, that offline conversation is, we're probably not going to have it. And they're not ready to take it to hybrid. We're not even close as an industry to move it there. And again, more on that later. But if you were to ask me, Chuck, late fall is probably a little more realistic, and early mid 2021 might be the reality that nobody wants to talk about, but I think is going to be part of the conversation, at least until we get all those other components lined up in terms of how do we do social distancing at events, how do we integrate hybrid attendees with face-to-face attendees. And we're also riding on the fact that the airlines got their stuff together in terms of getting people to and from conferences. So, you know, September, I got some stuff lined up that's been postponed, but I'm not banking on it.
Okay, thanks. And Susan, you're right there in the trenches doing the bookings and managing in one of the most popular cities in the world. So tell us a little bit about what your crystal ball tells you. And maybe your actual data tells you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, I think it's really going to depend a lot on what locations you're looking at in terms of whether it's regional, domestic, or international. And also what the health authorities are allowing us to do. Currently, for example, in British Columbia, we can't gather more than 50 people together. And that order is going to be in place for several months still. That's what the indication is. So I think it's really going to depend on if we're allowed to meet, and what Jim just said, then how comfortable people are going to be to meet. How far do they want to travel from home? How do they want to travel? Maybe a drive to destination is much more palatable than a fly to destination. Certainly, you know, from a timeline on the international side, that definitely will be maybe spring or even summer of next year. I can't see much international business happening in 2020. I'd like to hope it's different, but it just seems to be that'll be the case.
Great, thank you. So what I hear is that everyone does feel it's really possible more later fall. I heard November from two of you, some sprinklings of some things still might happen this summer, and some of the international meetings might be pushed back into 2021. But for the most part, we can all pretty much agree that right now, today, but maybe not tomorrow, depends on what happens when you listen to the news, that the fall of 2020 seems to align with what the data tells us from the polling. So let's talk about, I'm going to call it our fall normal. As I said earlier today with just the panelists, that I don't want to use the word the new normal because there's always going to be a new normal. So let's call it our fall normal right now. So when we think about the fall normal for 2020, the majority are looking, my question is, what does a meeting look like then? A lot of people are talking about hybrid meetings, which is the blending of in-person attendance and virtual attendance. So what I like about our panel is each of you offers a different angle on the industry. James from a technology and education standpoint, Leora from an education and also your experience in the hospitality industry, Susan from a sales, marketing, you know, CVB based, and Sean from the perspective of the management of several conference centers throughout the US. So my question is, from your perspectives, each of your unique perspectives, what does a hybrid meeting look like and feel like, and how can the industry best prepare for this potential new way of gathering? Let's go with Leora first.
You know, I just want to echo something that Susan alluded to. And Susan, I come from the CVB world. My first role in industry was at the Boston CVB, actually. So I appreciate destination marketing and how challenging that is right now. But what I want to echo is the tough four-letter word that we're living with, which is fear. And I think that is going to be a challenge, even into what will our meetings look like, Chuck. So, you know, I'll allude to what I wrote about in that article that you referenced earlier. You know, I think we're going to have to get accepting of certain things and flexible and resilient and just sort of really open to new things. You know, is it going to be comfortable to have someone serving me wearing a mask? I don't know that I'm personally ready for that yet, but we may have to, and I don't want to call it a new normal either. I'm calling it a temporary. You know, I think it's going to be in phases. And so this first phase, when we first start meeting, if we have to physically distance, I hate the term social distance because I think we're actually even socially closer now, frankly.
True.
But the physical distance is what I'd like to call it. But I think the concept of physical distancing in a meeting, if we're in November or December where we first start doing it, I think it's going to be that intrepid traveler who's willing to want to meet and accepting of seeing servers in masks, or maybe there's an option for seeing your conference virtually from home as opposed to attending in person. So I think there's going to have to be creativity as to how the conference maybe tiers itself to be available for those who don't want to actually travel yet to get there. And then what steps is it taking at the venue for those who are there? You know, another thing, Susan, that you brought up, 50 or less, meetings of 50 people or less. For some venues, can the venue financially afford to be open to accommodate 50 people or less? So that's going to impact a lot of things. There's so many moving parts to this, isn't it? But I do think with a blended hybrid kind of a meeting, that's a really cool opportunity for us to get creative with. And I was preparing for that with this event we were going to have in March. We were going to move some of the tables into other rooms and live stream it. We were going to arrange for hand sanitizing stations throughout. We were going to use this instead of shaking hands, namaste. We were going to have signs to discourage handshaking and encourage hand washing. We were going to actually make time in the schedule for hand washing. We had changed our buffets. And again, this was all the week before we ended up having to cancel, going into contingency mode. We were taking our buffet lunches and creating boxed lunches that were going to be served by just 1 or 2 employees as opposed to lots of folks getting to it. Coffee service will have to be paid attention to. So it's those elements that I was looking at just last month, thinking that we were going to have to go that way March 20th.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of how we're going to have to think for resuming in the fall.
And you were at the forefront. You were already planning this, you know, a month ago or more. So I'm going to ask, you know, this one I've been waiting to ask. We've got a technology guru here, James Spellos, and I want to hear from Jim, the technology side of this whole virtual meetings.
You know, a couple of
hybrid meetings, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, interesting things. I've been starting to talk to a lot of the providers of hybrid conferences, but there's a problem with that. None of them have time. They're all telling me the same thing. They are swamped with meeting professionals, reaching out to them saying, what does your service do? How do we use it? What does it cost? And I think what we have is a fundamental flaw on the facility side. And that fundamental flaw that every property, I don't care if it's a small or large one, has to address immediately is an issue of bandwidth. Because if you're even going to be streaming from within your own property, you better have the up and down speed that you need to make it not look choppy and look unprofessional. I hear all the stuff about the hybrid meeting. There are some great companies out there. In fact, I was involved with a meeting yesterday that was hybrid, that was using a landing page and integrated Zoom with it. So it was really, really cool how it worked. But it's really the first phase. I'm looking at this as very transitional to where we're going to be in 12 or 18 months. And I saw one of the comments in the chat that the younger generation is going to perceive that as the new normal. You know, I've heard everyone say, I don't like the term new normal. I don't like it either for one reason, because it ain't going to look anything like what we're used to. It's going to be so different. So there's so much there that's from a technical standpoint, but I think the beginning phases have to be facilities understanding their bandwidth needs, partnering with the companies that can provide this and taking a look at how it might look, and then being able to sell that to the meeting professional to say, this is what we can do. Also, by the way, for the meeting folks out there, it's an awful lot of companies you can bring into a facility, because the other issue I have seriously with facilities is the security of their bandwidth and the internet, and the fact that they've paid no attention to it for the past 20, 25 years. And guess what? They're not going to do so now in the rush to get more bandwidth in there. There's an awful lot of stuff that can go very wrong with a hybrid meeting, although I still think it's the best bet to be moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Susan, let's hear from you from a CVB standpoint and your experience in the industry about hybrid meetings, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're thinking.
Yeah, it certainly is the buzzword right now, hybrid meetings. I haven't seen any happen yet. People are talking that's what the future is going to hold. I did want to say something about the nature of our business is really to meet and to be together and to socialize and to handshake and hug and kiss. The industry itself is such a social industry that this is, outside of the business aspect, really turning the industry on its ear, because when you do get together and have a meeting, be it hybrid or social distancing or physical distancing, you're not going to be able to behave the way you normally do at a meeting. And does that mean then you're going to decide not to go, or decide to go in on the calling in or doing it online versus going personally? So time will tell. I think we're really in early days. I do know of some international conferences that had gone totally virtual right at the beginning, because the conference was coming up, similar to Leora's example. It was happening and they couldn't meet in person. They decided to do it virtual. They indicated it's quite successful, but is it profitable? Is it the way the business needs to go for the future, or for the foreseeable future? Again, that's hard to tell.
Thank you. And I know we have a lot of questions coming up here, so we'll get to those in a minute. Joel, I'm going to just ask Sean for his input from a venue management standpoint.
Yeah, I've got a lot of ideas running through my head. And I want to go back to the last question you asked about when these events were going to occur. What I heard in some of the answers is, I wonder if there's a pattern there, because across the board, I kind of gave a little bit different answer as far as it potentially being a little earlier. So we'll all get together on Halloween and decide who was right. But as it sits right now, the assumption for every single one of those, they're smaller in nature, they're regional, and they are hybrid. Every single one of them is moving that direction. And so people are putting those, the people who can do it within their venue, they're re-looking at things like their staffing. And so everybody knows, okay, there'll be changes to the food program. There's going to be changes to the sanitation. What do I need to do to train my team and buy equipment to support all that? Same thing with the technology side. Do I need to change up my technology staffing to be able to support these hybrid meetings? Am I going to go out there and look? And what we're seeing is people are doing the homework on platforms and everything else that they need to do to help get that launched, to try to get an advantage kind of, when we come back. And I think, to me, what is most clear on all this, this is not the first kind of bad day that we've had in our industry. And they all seem to take a similar pattern, right? I don't want to tell you how many of these I've seen, but more than one. And the truth of the matter is, there's this real deep dive, right, for a period of time. And that genius that predicts video conferencing will take all meetings from now on, and live humans will never come back together. That person comes out of the woodwork for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then live meetings come back stronger and bigger and more heavily attended than I've ever seen before. But what happens in the process is it's kind of the next evolution. And that's what I think is going to happen here. We're going to tie together things like live streaming and back channel and Twitter walls and virtual elements, and tie those together when we come back out of this. And all this did, when we look back at it, is really expedite that process, maybe 5 to 10 years. I don't know that it put us on a different path than we were on. I think it's just going to make it happen faster.
Great perspectives. Great perspectives. Thank you so much. Joel, I know we have some questions. I see it's blown up. I see them.
Oh, so, which is great. One that I think that would be relevant, again, kind of tying in with what we've already talked about, is, what do you think is going to be the pacing of meetings coming back? Do smaller meetings come back first, and if so, how big is that? And also, what kinds of meetings? Like, are social meetings going to be more in than conferences? Or what are your thoughts about kind of the pacing, like how this might be phased back in, and what kinds of events are going to be more likely to start up sooner, and which ones may have to hold off for a little while?
Can I jump in?
Go for it.
What I don't see is the big box meetings happening anytime soon. I don't see anything with an attendance base that I'm going to put a number on it that's arbitrary, but more than 100 people, because I think the uncertainty factor of everyone in terms of going to a crowd that large is going to be here for a while. I also think that it's going to roll out slowly. Again, people testing the waters. Let me go to one, and small local is another approach. Clearly something within driving distance, much more comfortable. So I get all the stuff that all the panelists have already said. I think it's really where we're going with this, which is test it out, keep it small, keep it local, keep people apart, include the hybrid if possible, are all part of what I think is going to happen.
Joel, I can add to that. What I'm concerned about, because I echo everything we've just had, it will be drive to, it will be smaller meetings, it will be very regionalized for a while. I'm concerned about destinations like Boston, where I work, that rely so much on big citywide conferences and conventions, because that will be the last. You know, I don't know, I wouldn't proclaim to be the expert to tell anyone the phasing, what's going to come first, second, or third. But I do think what's going to come last are sort of the big conferences or festivals and things where there are mass gatherings like that, and how that impacts our industry and our community for filling hotel rooms and meeting spaces in multiple venues. That's going to take longer. And that's where I definitely have a big concern.
Oh, go ahead, Susan.
I just want, yeah, I totally agree, Laura, that will, I think it's just going to go from small to big as we go through this process. One thing I'd like to say is that we are, I guess, I hate saying fortunate, but we are fortunate in the fact that we are at the end of the pandemic wave, and we're seeing what's happening in Asia and Europe, who went through what we're going through earlier. So yesterday I was reading some hotels now in Berlin are opening. So I think we have to look at what is going to happen in those locations and learn from that. Reach out to your industry colleagues there, find out how they're dealing with meetings, events. Are people coming back? Are people coming into the hotels? And how are restaurants and food service being handled? And take advantage of the fact that we can learn from people who are going through this prior to us.
One of the interesting things is the fact that the US did not all follow the same guidelines, is that some of us are flattening the curve. Some of us, some places, it's still on the steep incline. So it really depends too where you're at. And unfortunately, the virus doesn't know boundaries.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I don't think we're anywhere near flattening the curve. I think we flattened the first wave. And I think a lot of what, if we can look at that and take that as a good idea and a good thought, that's great. But I think that second wave is what's really going to make people think twice, because they're going to think it's over and then it's not. And that's when the massive change is going to happen in terms of how we do things in our industry.
Yeah. And again, looking at the examples of who's ahead of us and to see how they handle that second and potentially third wave as well. Because they will have that happen as well.
I think that's what's going to make meetings challenging in our country, Chuck, because this country is operating like 50 mini countries. And so I think it's going to be very confusing for folks where to have meetings, quite honestly, because different regulations and stipulations are applying state by state now. So I think everyone, if we're looking to have a meeting, we have to really know the policies and the guidelines that are set for 50 different individual states. And I think that's actually going to make it more challenging. But that may also change the question, Joel, for November, what does the fall look like? With having so many different policies, we could have a wave, and that's
maybe, possibly.
That's going to impact the meetings.
Does it go back to your idea about them being more regional, maybe? Because there's a concern, can I get on a plane and try, fly?
And are the regions going to be defined by the coalitions? Susan's in Canada, and in Canada, the various provinces are really making the decisions for their provinces, as she said. And here the states are, but some of the states have joined in coalitions as well. And so, will that regionalization be based upon who's in your coalition of? The New England,
right.
Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware kind of area? Will it be, this upper Midwest and what their guidelines are saying and how things, so it's all very, very interesting. And so, but let's go on. Sean, did you want to add anything before we go on to another question?
No, thank you.
Okay. Joel, another question?
Yeah, we've got one here that definitely for Jim and anyone else that wants to weigh in, people with questions about virtual meetings. So some questions about, should you be charging people for offering the hybrid approach right now, right? The teleconferencing equipment or the streaming access and things like that. And also, is there any data yet on how organizations are planning to price their events knowing that things now might be virtual instead of in person, and what does that look like? So any thoughts you have about how both venues and planners should be charging and recovering costs related to transitioning to a more virtual environment?
The answer to the first question is absolutely yes. We should be charging for everything right now because we need to get business back moving in this country, and that's one way it's going to happen. Second question is more difficult, but I think it's part of what the planner does as part of their job, which is understand a cost-benefit analysis of what their costs are versus what their expenses are. Understanding all the components now they're going to have to pay for, as opposed to all the components that they won't have to pay for, and that's going to determine organization by organization, what that registration fee looks like. Look, we're all going to have to reduce our fees. We're all going to have to reduce what we charge, but nobody can do it for free. So I think it's going to be a matter of, no matter what anybody says right now, everyone's making it up. And that's a good thing. That's a starting point. Give us 6 months, give us 9 months. I think we'll finally start to see that. So charge what you feel your attendees will pay and what you believe the value is, and see what happens from there.
Jim, do you also feel that maybe the pricing should be tiered? If somebody is coming in person versus a virtual experience, might it possibly offer a price differential? I'm just putting it out there as something to think about, to get creative.
It's a great question. My initial instinct is no, because you don't want to tell people who are attending virtually that it's devalued. If you're giving the person live a lot more and you can show that, maybe that's the case. But I think that's a slippery slope to go down.
Right. And I think it's an important point to note when planning our meetings.
Yeah.
So for the spirited debate, here's a Jim, that's good feedback. What we've seen is on the other side of that is there are pricing models. Where did I hear somebody say, if you're not building your VDMP now, you're a dinosaur, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't have some sort of virtual, and the premise is that to actually host the event on site, there may be higher cost implications. Understanding the technology and the staffing and that piece, but just dollar for dollar. And so does it represent an opportunity to sell the on-site experience at a slightly higher price, but to be able to capture that virtual element in the off-site, you might have to look at a slightly lesser price. Like you say, we'll look down the road and see who's right. But on the on-site piece of that, there are food elements, there are other service elements that you do need to support that you could at least make the case that this might be worth a little bit more money. Whether you win the discussion.
I think that's very reasonable, especially with the real costs that are going to be affecting what you have to pay on site. I think the flip side of that, though, is that unless the planner is really good at preparing a meeting that is as compelling virtually as it is live, you're going to find those virtual attendees going, no, this isn't worth it because it's all based on the live attendee. And I think that's going to be a huge part of how we design conferences right now, and even design smaller meetings, is to make sure that nobody's left out.
And Jim,
somebody asked that very question on the bottom. I saw one of the chat questions was, well, if you're going to do these things virtually, why do we need a venue? And I think what you just said answers that question. Oh, you need the venue more than ever, assuming what role you want the venue to play. The venues can make the case that that's the home base for this whole event. And if they take responsibility for the technology creation, if they take responsibility for the platform, if they take responsibility for managing the tech on the backside, then they bring an awful lot of value to people.
If I may just throw one thing out there right now, which is this. Now you're thinking, right, it has his gear again, but you know what? Did you know that there's actually an app out there called Spaces, which interacts in virtual reality with Zoom? We're not ready yet for this. But Sean, you mentioned it earlier, I think everybody did, that it's expediting the process of how quickly we get ready for everything. And right now, in the next couple of years, having a virtual reality hybrid meeting might increase that experientialness of the attendees who can't make it. Just real fascinating stuff to be able to watch right now.
Who doesn't want to go to this meeting by now? But this sounds cool.
Right, I know. And actually, Jim, that's great to follow up as well, too, because we've got a couple questions come in the chat box and in the Q&A about what does a venue have to do to actually host a hybrid or a virtual meeting successfully? Because this comes up a lot, and people will say, hey, we can do that, but then they've got one small camera in the back of the room. So what are just some basic elements that you say lead to a successful hybrid or virtual meeting?
From a facility perspective, get a lot of bandwidth and bring in a contractor who understands how to do them, because your in-house AV company doesn't. And as someone who used to run an AV company, they are scrambling to stay at par with the curve and not ahead of the curve. There are dozens of companies out there that are providing full service hybrid virtual meetings that have done it for years. And these are the people you're going to need to be talking to right now. If I was the planner, I wouldn't trust the hotel saying, oh, we can do all this. I want an independent company out there. And they might even need to bring the bandwidth in to make that viable.
I'm hoping that the hotels are actually doing their homework right now and looking into all of this, using this time to get ready for that. The other thing I would want to add is that, you know, we're looking at this hybrid model as, to me, again, this temporary phase for the venues who are out there. The hope is that we're all kind of come back and meet in person at some point, because that's what people do want. But at least to get us through this, to keep the organizations viable and meaningful, the hybrid model is what has to keep us alive, right? I just want to add, you know, Jim, that VR component of it, that's what we're teaching. And I'm in the School of Hospitality at Boston University. We have an events concentration. And so the ability to keep that experiential model for an event is something that we're challenging our students to do. That's definitely going to be input into our curriculum. And likewise, interestingly, on the teaching side of things, our master's program, the university is, you know, for the fall, right now, the intention is for us to teach in the classroom, but also with a virtual component so the students can live stream. So we're all going to get trained on a skill set so that we can keep that experience. It's basically a little event now, the classroom, right? So I think that's how we all have to start thinking, again, for hopefully a short term, but it's a next phase, and hopefully we can all get back to meeting in person soon.
One of the things I'd like to say is, so of course our collection of venues are not hotels, but more unique properties. And what I love about this, and we have to be smart about this unique venues, is that some of us have this built-in technology capability that no hotel, you know, no Hilton or Hyatt or Westin can compete with. You've got that bandwidth. You've got the in-house expertise because you have to do it for distance education, you know, all types of reasons that you're doing these things. And so, you know, this is a differentiating sales point for you right now, that you want to make sure you're shouting from the rooftop loud so the industry hears it, that you've got some built-in expertise and you know how to do this. It's at 2:40 and I still have 4 questions, and it looks like we still have 16. Joel, you want to pick one that's really voted up here and see what we do?
Let's talk a little bit about liability. Some people have some questions about who should be bearing liability here. Is it the venue? Is it the planner and the group? Is it the attendee? What are your thoughts about who's liable in meeting in a COVID-19 world? And what kind of steps can you take to manage or protect yourself?
And I'd like to hear from, let's go Susan first, because you're in the business of writing contracts, right? So.
Well, actually, as a DMO and a CVB, we don't write contracts. We make the introductions.
Okay.
And but I know there's been a lot of conversations between the hotels, the venues, and the clients. And this is really where relationships and long-term relationship building comes into play. You want to have those relationships and people you work with to have some flexibility, and for the future as well, have really honest and open conversations. I think contracting in the future is going to be much more complicated than it has been in the past, now that we've all lived through this. And but yeah, I think the relationships and having the knowledge of how we've survived this are going to be very key moving forward.
Great, thank you. Poor Allison, I just have to jump in there. People want to know why Allison hasn't spoken yet. Just so you know, Allison, she's managing the chat box for us. She's actually part of the Unique Venues team. So I'm sorry, there's probably confusion. People are thinking, well, there's a panelist who hasn't said anything yet. So you've got people looking out for you, Allie. Okay, let's go on. Who wants to chime in based on what Susan said? And we're talking about liability here.
I'll offer up this, Chuck. You are onto something here, and at the risk of calling out the obvious, that could be another session where you maybe have some people with that kind of expertise, because you are talking about a lot of different legal aspects. Who's responsible if the company sponsors an event and someone gets sick on site? What's the venue's responsibility, code of conduct for attendees? How will the information, if there is a virtual element, how will that be protected and used? You got a lot of open items there, and I think you're onto a really good topic.
And there's also the whole vendor aspect. Some of these conferences bring vendors in, and so we've talked about it. There's some registration for attendees and attendee indemnity, but there's also, you know, the association, organization, group, whatever. And then there's the suppliers who are asked to come in and bring their goods and, you know, all of the live, there is a lot to talk about. And I think Joel probably already has that written down as a potential topic for us for a future expert panel. So.
Chuck, that's why I ended up having to cancel our event March 20th, because there was an incident in the city of Boston that did happen where it was traced that folks got sick there. And I mean, who knows how you trace it back, and it just would have opened up a can of worms. So I think that's a really important piece before anybody has meetings, is to make sure everybody's protected and knows who's responsible for what, you know, going forward.
Yeah, Chuck, I had heard a legal industry person in our industry, Jonathan Howe, talk a few weeks ago about this. And essentially what he said was, changing so much, we don't even know what's going on. You know, it's going to be a work in progress. And to think if we wait 6 months, it'll be clear in the liability side. I think it's going to have to wait till something actually happens and then see what occurs. You know, law tends to follow precedent. I think the idea of having a legal session with you guys is an amazing one, and probably could take 3 days rather than 3 minutes to talk about everything.
I have a feeling we can probably count on that. Would you say, Joel?
Oh, absolutely. Got it noted.
Joel, before I was going to move on. Is it okay to move on with
yeah,
any?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and move on, because I know you've got a couple that I think will answer some of the questions that are out here as well.
Okay, great. So when I looked, we were talking about the cleaning protocols, which ties in with the liabilities. Does anyone have any resources you can share or information about cleaning protocols, information you've heard about cleaning protocols for venues? You know, venues want to make sure they're ready for the clients, and I guarantee the clients want to be assured as well. And also parlay that into some food service issues, because I know we hear our venues talking about food and how we serve food safely, yet can still provide more than just that box lunch. How do we provide varying levels of food service and catering while maintaining a clean environment, a safe environment for people? What are you hearing out there?
I know the American Hotel and Lodging Association, again, I'm coming from a hotel standpoint, so I apologize, but there are a lot of learned lessons that can transcend and work for any venue. But just yesterday, actually, the American Hotel and Lodging Association did come out with a program called Safe Stay. And they did work with folks from numerous hospitality companies. It includes the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. Actually, it includes Accor, which is a Paris-based company, so it's not just US-based. Red Lions, Host Hotels, Hyatt. And it's a pretty good guide, and it does get specific. That's the key thing, right? It's getting specific. It's one thing to say you have a certification, but if you can't share what the specifics are, I don't know how satisfying that will be for folks. And it includes, you know, steps for employee and guest health, employees' responsibilities, cleaning products and protocols. And then it does have, and they do call it physical distancing, actually, steps for physical distancing. But I would recommend, you know, each hotel company has also come out with their own. Hilton came out with something, Wyndham, Best Western, Hyatt, you know, Marriott. So it can get confusing, right? Because there's so many different protocols and sort of what's the ultimate. I think the fact that the American Hotel and Lodging Association helps sort of aggregate it all is great, because this way this can sort of be the mothership for the hotel sector at least. And maybe that should exist on some platform for venues so that there's some standard. You know, you shared earlier, Chuck, this has brought our industry together. I don't think anybody wants to compete necessarily. We all want to help each other succeed.
We do.
So I think that, you know, even if it's standards for all venues to work together toward, I think that would be a really, really wise thing to do, so that we're all operating off the same standards and SOPs.
We can add some shareable resources to our uniquevenues.com resources page, and maybe we can share that link right there, because you're right. I mean, a lot of our venues do offer overnight lodging and accommodations. How about some more of our panel members when it comes to the whole protocol and speaking in the cleaning and food service and those aspects?
Just to follow up on that, I think I'm noticing in the chat room that there's a lot of guidelines from the various government organizations, CDC and so on. I know the airlines have got cleaning guidelines as well that they're putting together. So yeah, there's a lot of information, and I think your various associations are going to be putting together guidelines, as the Hotel Association has, as Leora said. But at this point, there's probably more information than we can all assimilate, but trying to assimilate it as much as can, and making it make sense for your particular venue or your particular organization.
Okay. Jim or Sean, anything you want to add, especially from the food service side of things?
Yeah, well, from a food service side, Chuck, as you know, many people might know, I do a lot of volunteer work with Rock and Wrap It Up, which is food recovery both throughout the US and Canada. And what we're finding is right now an awful lot of food that's short dated, that doesn't have to be thrown away, can be given to people in need. And because of the protections that this country and Canada has them on a provincial basis. I'm not sure if there's a national food recovery plan, but in the States, it's the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, which means that any donation you do for a charity for food, if there's no potential negative, aspects of doing it, if you're doing it in good faith, you're not going to get sued, and nobody ever has gotten sued. So I think part of the process down the road in an uncertain planning time is to be aware of where that food can go to if it's not used, so it's not wasted and it's brought to people who need it, because there's a huge shortage right now of food out there for the at-risk community.
Sean, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, a little different direction. Jim is absolutely right about opportunities to kind of repurpose that food and redirect. He's absolutely totally right. I think you were also talking about some of the protocols you're going to see at the various venues. When Leora mentioned the fact, I think you also hit a really great point. All the brands, all the chains, everybody's going to have their own. And we are working very closely with a lot of them, working directly with CDC and some others. And what I think we all have to accept here is that we've not ever been in this place before, so everyone is working on an informed opinion. That's why you see so much difference across the different chains, brands, governments, all those kind of things. So I think we're going to have to live with that for a while until there's one single standard. I don't know if that'll ever quite come out, but you talked about some of the changes to sanitation or to food programs. So, why not jump on food program for a second? I think as a venue or as an attendee, you're going to have to probably look at a couple of different steps of recovery on for example, the food program. I think an absolutely no contact experience is where this whole thing might start from a food and beverage delivery. So whether that's breakfast that's market style or packaged items, and I hate to say this because this is the biggest downer of the whole show here, Chuck. Here it comes. Gone temporarily will be the days of that bottomless cup of coffee on the central break station that you can just, it's good. I know that enough is a reason to change your pricing. I know, but you're going to have to find different solutions for that. So single serve, those kind of environments in this no contact, because I think as venues are trying to push to open earlier in a responsible fashion, they're going to have to make concessions. And that's one of the approaches that they're going to have to look at before you work to more of a modified or limited contact. And that's where you start to see some things like these served buffets or plexiglass off food stations, or you've seen them maybe now they have kind of single-use disposable glove dispensers people can use right there at the stations, sanitation stations, condiments, all single serve. It's going to really call for a redesign, but I think that's the strategy. If you can demonstrate that you can do this in a few different steps. And the last step is, quote, back to normal, whatever that is. But you got to get there. And if you wait for that, you could be well into 2021 before they give you a blessing to open. So you're going to have to come up with a couple levels before that.
Joel, how about some questions?
Yeah, I think we've got, we're kind of touching on some of it now here, but we've had several questions about, what kinds of social distancing, guidelines are people putting in effect? What are all the things that we should be considering? And whether that's registration tables and spacing while people are waiting, or whether that's hand washing breaks, or, some of the things we've already touched on. But also, how do we promote those things without making the situation worse, right? How do we do this in a way that shows responsibility and doesn't create fear or panic or concern about attending? So how do we reinsure people? And then ultimately, how do we enforce those things? So if we say people have to bring their own PPE and wear a mask, what does a venue do when someone shows up without one? What does enforcement look like in a social, or a group of 8 people gathers in the corner to have a conversation when they're not supposed to do that? How do venues deal with those kinds of things? Thoughts about any of that?
I think everything today has to be done with a sense of care and compassion. And I think everybody is, I'm hoping people are accepting it that way. I wouldn't be surprised if, registration kits involve a mask, hand sanitizer, and a pair of gloves. And if it has to get mailed to everybody before they show up or picked up somewhere on the way in, that might be part of the kits. Is that what we want? No. Is that the message we want to send? For the short term, that's what we have to do, and I think we know what we have to do to make it successful and safe. And I think that's everyone's first priority is safety. So I would be surprised if anyone had an issue with it. How we deliver the message, that's where we're going to have to be extremely careful with our words and tactful, and it has to be positioned properly. We want to have a successful event. We want it to be safe and secure. Here are the steps that we're taking, and here are the options. So I think honesty, quite honestly, is the way to communicate it.
I think enforcement's going to be critical too, because once you let somebody in there without a mask or violating those rules, people are going to be watching. People are going to say, well, you let that person do it. I think it's going to have to be pretty strict early on. It'll lax up as time goes on. But for example, as Leora was talking about something that's happening this fall, perhaps, you're going to need to make sure that you clearly communicate to people that if you don't follow these guidelines, you won't be allowed to participate in the meeting.
You could, that's a great point. And you could, Leora, I love your idea about kind of a welcome kit. It doesn't feel that welcoming, but your welcome kit, right? But what we may be faced with is included in that is kind of the instruction manual. And this is the rule of guide. And this is it. And you'll be, whatever, if you're going to temperature check at the entrance, or if you're not, if you're on the honor system, whatever it is, put that to people up front. And it's kind of odd to go to a meeting and be told you need to stick to the scheduled lunch break or coffee break because we can't have a lot of congestion in the corridor. That's different, but you tell them up front. I think it becomes part of that welcome kit.
And that virtual swag bag is going to have a lot of things that we never thought would be giving away.
That's right.
That's right. And if it's shared via app, listen, there's lots of, the word touch point almost is an ironic word these days, isn't it? Because we're not supposed to touch right now, but think about the app, think about the website. So there are ways to get the communication out there ahead of time. We do that now anyway. It's just going to have to be that much more important.
And I think we're all living in this new reality as well. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the US, but here we have to line up for the grocery store 6 feet apart. And, people are accepting of that. To Laura's point, it's all kindness and compassion. There's no one forcing that, at the grocery store. So I think it's just going to be the new reality, and people will accept that in terms of what we need to do to be safe.
And one of the comments I'm seeing here in the chat, some of the concerns also have to do with moving with the physical distancing, with the food service, the way it's going, the concerns about all of the progress made in sustainability efforts and ways, feeling like that is being jeopardized in the process of meeting the needs of this. So there's
that's a Pandora's box, Chuck, because you can make the comment right now that we're doing a far better job of protecting our planet being socially distanced for the past 2 months than we ever have before. So I'll be interested to see how that continues to manifest down the road.
Yeah, it's true. Great. We have time for one more question, Joel.
Do you still have one on your list? I mean, we've got some others here I can pull from, but I didn't know where you were at.
Go ahead and pull from them. I believe we've
Sure. We've got a question I think is relevant that, again, people have a lot of questions about how do they market and promote their venues during this time. I mean, people obviously want to keep trying to book business and not just throw up their hands in frustration. So how do you communicate, or what kinds of messaging should you be doing around pushes for selling and marketing and advertising your venue right now?
I teach marketing, and I just finished my class in my semester, so I'm happy to start this conversation. Listen, right now is not a time to necessarily be, quote, selling. But it's a time to stay relevant and communicate. And what's really important to people right now? It's health, it's safety, it's family, it's togetherness, it's everything we provide in hospitality. And I think those are the messages that we have to share. You know, I follow on Instagram a lot of the restaurateurs who are in Boston, who are just so active, trying to just do 1 week delivery and pickup just to make money to pay their employees. And the care and the compassion that they're communicating right now makes you want to make them win. They just want to, you know, you want them to see them succeed. So I think it's a matter of sharing a lot of these emotions. Yes, it's cliche, we're in it together, but that is the truth. And it's showing that you're still relevant, but sharing messages of what you're doing, how you're doing good, taking care of our people, how we care and compassion, maybe even the steps that we're taking in the meantime to make our venues ready when you are. I think those are important messages to communicate right now, not selling, but communicating.
And I think trust is another one I'd add on to that. People want to feel, they want to trust the venue. They want to trust their organization is working on their behalf as attendees. So trust. Okay, go. Let's get some more because it's 2:56 and I'm reading people saying I could have stayed on here for another 2 or 3 hours. So, anybody want to add to what Leora has said?
Can I add from the technology standpoint that, you know, we've been in a situation where people in our industry that we've been resistant to really playing with new technologies. Here's the opportunity, guys. Here's the time. You know, I mean, right? Okay. Case in point, tools, toys here. Got a 3D 360 camera right here. Any facility right now that's worth their money would start thinking about really creative ways to showcase that space in a very digital environment, becoming ready for what's going to happen next, but also going, okay, this technology works great for us, this doesn't. You know, if we have the opportunity to try new things, let's do it in a time when everything is being thrown up in the air as it is.
I agree. I agree so much, Jim. And take those and record them and put them on your unique venues profile, you know, because you've got the video. That's one of the capabilities you automatically get. Put it up there because people love to watch those videos. And right now, and they don't need a fancy video. They love the fact that you're walking around talking from your own perspective and showing it. I love it. I love that.
Chuck, that's one of the things you guys do so well. To Leora's point, this is about relationship building and just socially staying connected to people versus selling. I think that's one of the great resources at the risk of sounding like I'm kind of plugging unique venues here. That is something where you guys really excel. And it's good to have you as support for that. But also, if you are a venue operator and you don't think you're all that great at it, 1-800-UNIQUE-VENUES is a good answer for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We're coming to the end here, and you can count on more of these because these are our most highly attended, most interactive, most highly engaged webinars, and we'll continue to put together great panels. And our panel today has been amazing. I'll let Joel close out, but before so, I just want to say a huge thank you to all 4 of you and Allison for monitoring those chats. Shout out to Allison. Note the last name. I'm a big fan. But but I just want to say that I am so appreciative of all 4 of you. I learn from each and every one of you. I've learned from all of you today, and I respect each and every one of you as mentors, colleagues, and counterparts in the industry. And we got this. We're gonna make sure we get through this all together. And thank you, Joel. You want to go ahead and wrap up with your slides?
Yes, can do. And just really quickly, because I have a couple of questions out there, we will send out the poll results to everyone that was here today that showed up and attended. And it is being recorded. So again, you can watch it again or share it with other people by going to uniquevenues.com/resources, and you'll find it there within 24 hours. And so just really quickly, I want to remind everybody about upcoming events. And you can see that we've got some more webinars going on. We just keep doing them, about 3 a week. It's been our pleasure to do that for everyone. We've got member group therapy tomorrow for all members out there, but then we're doing special breakout for Canadian venues on May 19th for member group therapy, and for US venues on May 21st. So make sure you register for those. For planners out there, we've got an orientation. If you're new to the industry or new to unique venues, we're doing an orientation to talk more about how we can help you on May 12th. And then we have our roundtable session on May 28th. And then as far as webinars go, we've got a webinar on leadership and how to kind of inspire your team and keep them motivated through this time on May 13th with Dr. Michael Brown, who did our wellness workshops last month. Salem is going to present on building a brand guide for your venue on marketing strategies on May 14th. And our own Todd Wonders, our director of IT, is going to present on digital advertising on, I can't see it because the video is blocking it, on May 20th, and talk about what digital advertising is, how it works, and why it's important to you. So we've got lots of things coming up out there. Again, you can find it all on uniquevenues.com/resources. The last thing I'd like to highlight is that Allie and the marketing team put together an outstanding kids packet. You see the link up there at the top. I put together a tiny URL for it up there for uv-kids-packet. It's like a 12 or 13 page coloring packet with activities to help them see themselves as unique, identify why they're unique, have conversations with you as a parent and other family members. And it's just really, it was a great thing that they put together. So if you're looking for something to do with your kids, or if you're looking to do something with your spouse and talk about why you're unique, go ahead and hit that link up and download that packet, and best wishes for using it. And again, I just also want to echo my thanks to Chuck and the panelists today for putting all of this together. It's been great to continue to do these things, and we really appreciate the commitment that everyone's made to helping our members, our planners, and the industry as a whole with continuing their own professional development and just navigating through these challenging times. So thank you, my thank you as well. And Chuck, I'll kick it to you for a final wrap up.
I just want to say thank you so much. I hope everybody stays healthy and hopeful through these times, and we all need to remain encouraged to do the best that we can. And you can count on any ideas or thoughts you have for topics for future webinars and expert panels. You can go ahead and send to Joel, Joel, at uniquevenues.com. And please feel free to copy myself, Chuck, at uniquevenues.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you all. And onward we go. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Chuck.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Joel. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.